All right, we want to get started.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Michelle Lewandowski, the archivist for the School Sisters of Notre Dame in Milwaukee. And I'm also the Vice President and President-elect of ACWR. And I'd like to welcome you today to the Education Committee's webinar on collaboration between universities and religious archives. So I'm here today to introduce our moderator and two panelists, and then I will turn it over to them. So our moderator today is Sister Grace Marie Del Priore. She was an elementary school teacher before getting her MLIS at the University of Pittsburgh in 2016. She has served her community, the Felician Sisters of North America, as the archivist for the last 7 years. She oversaw the move and development of the new Felician Archive and Heritage Center in Livonia, Michigan. She's been a member of ACWR since 2016 and has served on the Technology Committee and now the Education Committee since 2019. She lives in Detroit with 4 other sisters and 2 large dogs. Our first panelist today is Jennifer Morrison, who is the Associate Archivist for the Dominican Sisters of Grand Rapids, Michigan. She was previously the Aquinas College Archivist and also spent 15 years as the local history department at the Grand Rapids Public Library. Her career has involved working in museums, historic sites, as well as archives. Finally, we have Veronica Buchanan, who currently serves as the archivist for the Sisters of Charity in Cincinnati, Ohio. She is also the executive secretary for ACWR and is the project director for the NHPRC's Collaborative Archives Grant this year related to Catholic Native American boarding schools. Prior to serving with the Sisters of Charity, she was an archivist in a special collections entity at the University of Cincinnati. So please welcome our guests. And Sister Grace, I am going to turn it over to you to get us started.
Thank you. So today we have 2 panelists who will be sharing about projects they've been involved with universities. So let's begin with each member of our panel describing what that project was and some details with that. Veronica, let's start with you.
Sure. So I started here with the sisters in 2016, and within about a year of my starting, there was a new library director hired at Mount St. Joseph University, and he was entirely new to the Catholic world, and so this seemed to be, so we were looking at ways to collaborate to help him learn more about the community and help us too with the archives. So of course, you know, most community archives, we wear many hats. It's not just an archive. As you can see behind me, we have an extensive library collection. This is about half of it. And so the idea was that we could work with our sponsored university to actually catalog our whole collection. So that's a brief blurb about what we'll be talking about.
And I can share about really a couple different relationships with professors at colleges, which have resulted in multiple projects. And I'll emphasize the project that was the most collaborative with our archives. One of them was a history professor, as probably wouldn't surprise you, and the other was a geography professor. And so I'll talk about the main project I worked with both of them that was collaborative with the archives.
Very good. So let's start at the beginning. How did you form the relationship at the university and start the collaboration?
Well, I guess I'll jump off on that. So as I kind of just shared a little bit, I had started in 2016, and at that time, there really wasn't anybody over the library officially. I don't know when the person had left previously, but there was quite a vacancy for a bit. So I didn't really get a chance to connect with the university library until Scott Lloyd was hired early 2017. And he came from Christian university, you know, another denomination. So he had some sense and spirituality, but not as much in the Catholic realm, as well as about sisters and the multitude of things that we have represented in our collection. So we initially had a tour here of the Mother House and of our archives. And that's where, at the time, we were in a basement. And basically an entire room was devoted just to our library collection. And that's where the idea first started, where it's like, none of these are really accessible to anyone outside of really the archives. Even the sisters didn't know much about this collection. So it was a great opportunity to learn more about it from our perspective, as well as to share it with others.
And in my case, so as we just said, I'm the Associate Archivist for the Dominican Sisters of Grand Rapids. And before that, I was the Aquinas College Archivist. And the Aquinas College is a small, traditionally Catholic liberal arts school here in our community that was founded by our sisters. So I served as their archivist for 7 years. And that's at that time I got to know a lot about the sisters. Historically, they were quite involved at Aquinas, and so there are files on all of them at Aquinas, and then that had a lot to do with also getting to know Sister Mary, who was the archivist for the sisters, and learning about the community even more, and also helped, me qualify for my job with the sisters. And while I was the Aquinas College Archivist, I was very concerned with raising the visibility of the archives and increasing patronage. It's a small archive in the kind of a corner in the library, and not everybody knew it existed. And of course, that really affected my work. So one of my main jobs as Aquinas College Archivist was to do outreach, and again, to get more attention. And so I did succeed in that way, and including with the faculty. And then when I went to work for the sisters, I kind of kept some of those professors and explained to them that now I'm in this organization connected with the college in many ways, particularly historically, but that has a whole new archival collection that could be mined. So I had in some ways an advantage, and I definitely pressed my advantage. I already knew these folks.
So the next question is about the development of the project. How did you determine what the project would be?
I typically find that I want to let the faculty person tell me what their need is. So for example, this geography professor always makes a story map with her class. And for anyone who doesn't know what a story map is, it's kind of an online platform where you can enter text, and you can play with text and images, and adjust how they are positioned on the screen at any time, and have text scroll past the images. And you can also add elements like video clips and audio clips, and it's kind of a nice little online exhibit. And one of the things that you often put into a story map is a map. So geography folks really started the whole story map movement and like them and still work with them. And so she wanted her class particularly to work with primary sources. She wanted them to have that experience and learn about what that's like and the value of them and how you can use them. But that also requires certain kinds of materials. So story maps are very visual. So we had to have a lot of visual items. Also, she had a class of anywhere from 8 to 12 students. She wanted to create one story map, but she wanted them all to have an individual piece of it so that they could be graded specifically on their part. And that requires a particular kind of collection. It means that your collection has to have some consistency so that students could do different things, but have the same kinds of resources. So it takes certain kinds of resources, and it takes planning. And so with that project, we did a lot of planning together. We had multiple meetings. We shot many emails back and forth. I visited the class, and the professor came to the archives. So it was a fair amount of work thinking through, strategizing, how do we create these learning objectives, and how do we do it using the archives?
And I'll share for ours, of course, the springboard idea was that cataloging project initially, but I'll just share a little bit more about what that eventually led to. I know we'll talk about it more in depth, but from that initial idea, as Jennifer was sharing, we have what we call common ground classes for orientation for all of the students at our sponsored Mount St. Joseph University. And the professors were looking for more content from our collections that they can share and form more syllabus, items about. So we could share now all the different theses and dissertations of the sisters to show the broad range, from biology to history to sociology. I mean, we have so many different aspects to share, ecology, and environmentalism. So they really were able to bring a broader perspective to students about the work of the sisters and their personal interest and educational backgrounds. So that was really illuminating as a part of this project. And down the road, another thing that came out of this initial collaboration was more further collaboration than other grant funded projects, where the university was able to digitize their entire student newspaper collection, which has been used by professors for a variety of research projects, including one about the history of the college during World War II and how the students were involved and affected. So yeah.
Yeah, I think they say in the business world that your best customers are your previous customers. And I think we probably find that in collaborations between archives and universities that if the professor has a good experience, that there's another project maybe around the corner and down the line.
Mm-hmm.
So it comes down to relationships.
Very much.
Did you formalize the project or the process? Was there an agreement or some other paperwork involved?
No, there were emails. In the case of my history professor, now she had me come to her class and speak many times, but this year starting a whole new class because the college is starting this block scheduling format, which is where the students literally take one class at a time. So very different, very innovative, requiring her to really start from scratch and form a whole new class. And so she and I met over coffee. So I would say it's fairly informal. I'm always interested in making them happy because I like these projects, and they need us in order to get their class taken care of. So no, we never had anything written except for we could have found an email here or there.
That's pretty much the same for us. I mean, since the university was our sponsored ministry at the time, there really wasn't a need for that kind of formal agreement when it came to the cataloging. It was more just about, as you said, emails about more of the procedure behind it. The only kind of formal paperwork we got into was when we got more into those grant projects. Some were funded internally through the community. There are special grants that every sister can award, basically. They call them Sister Elise grants. So each sister is eligible to get one, but they have to be connected with the institution. So here in the archives, we had a sister who was a teacher or a professor at Mount St. Joseph for many years. So she was able to co-sponsor a grant to help with those, the student newspaper collection. And why I mentioned in the introduction about the NHPRC grant is part of that we applied for with Mount St. Joseph because they have what was our Catholic directory collection. Once we moved a few years after this initial collaboration, they were able to take that collection on in its entirety because we just didn't have the space any longer in our new space. So that's about it when it comes to the formal paperwork.
So as a follow-up to that, do you think it might have been helpful to have that, or that it wouldn't have been necessary?
For the initial project with the library piece, I don't think it would have been needed. We had such a good rapport, and actually not having something kind of written and set in stone and formal helped us to kind of establish that rapport more, by connecting and sharing either issues that arose or questions that I had or that they had. That we built such a strong relationship from that initial project that we've now collaborated so frequently, it's almost weekly now. So I'd say, not having that kind of formal agreement really helped to build more of a collaborative spirit.
Yes, in my case also, I have a relationship with these professors, and so we've worked together in the past, and I suppose it could be useful if you're not as familiar with the professor, and there could be potential for misunderstanding about expectations. I could see that being a possibility. It definitely wasn't necessary for us. It was a creative process, as you said, Veronica, and so lots of brainstorming, and I'm not sure we could have articulated that all in a contract.
On a related note, did you need to get any permissions either from the administrations of the religious community or the university?
No, working with the college, and particularly this college that the sisters founded, is important to my community and our leadership team and our sisters in our community. And so it's considered a part of my job is to do outreach and to work with groups like this, and again, particularly this specific college. And I'm sure that the faculty people, I'm not a academic myself, so I'm not familiar with everything that they have to do, but I'm sure that they had their requirements, and that was up to them.
Mm-hmm.
In some cases, this project involved, my history professor reached out to other local history organizations, and in some cases there were fees involved. So I'm sure she had to work with her college on that.
And with us, it's just like you shared, Jennifer, there was such a strong encouragement from both the university as well as our community to foster this collaboration and instill the spirit and the charism of the community with the university. Because, as I think we only have maybe one sister that's involved on the board now with the university, so there isn't that strong presence of the sisters as there's been from pretty much day one, of course. So this was a way that we could start to foster a deeper understanding of the mission and history and spirit of the sisters, and hopefully, and include that, as we shared, with the curriculum and the orientation classes and scholarship by the professors.
Right. So looking actually to bring some of those connections back.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And it's just continuing to grow. Like this year, a whole team of faculty members from a variety of departments actually came together to write a series of chapters about different sisters who were either the head of their departments at a time or were scholars in their field. And I think that's going to be published early next year, but it's a whole wide-ranging process. And some of the sisters were still living, so they were able to come in. And in that case, we ended up getting some more resources and copies of books that we hadn't previously had from sisters. So yeah, it's just been a wonderful experience that just continues to grow and build.
So did any problems arise as you worked together on the project? And what did that look like?
I would say there are challenges, things like scheduling, strategizing. So we had a plan to have the class visit our archive, and there's something like a dozen students. And so how do you make that possible? We strategize bringing in volunteers, but as opposed to a normal patron who would come in and we would have a patron interview, and then start pulling material, we anticipated that, and we imagined what they would be wanting in advance, and pulled a lot of that in advance. But then even having to think about, all right, how are 12 students going to sit at our tables and chairs? And so I would say more challenges rather than problems.
Yeah, I definitely echo that too. I just speaking about the library project specifically, a sister had gone through and created a card catalog of the collection. And I think it was organized kind of vaguely by, sister author or church or Ohio, so very broad subject items. And so there was a lot of internal strife within the department initially about the idea of we transitioned to a Dewey Decimal System to reflect the cataloging system that's used by our university. So there was, at least for us internally, a bit getting, of a grace period to get used to, how do I find books now? And one thing the university library was able to provide us, the department directly, we actually have a spreadsheet of all of the books. So they don't even have to go to the university catalog website. They can just search the whole collection from a spreadsheet, and that's, just internally available through our department server. But that was kind of one, kind of peace offering to kind of help say, okay, we can still search it. It's available, not in cards, but it's on the spreadsheet. It's the same concept, and you can search by author and title, and so that seemed to help. When we had students actually from the university helped us to reshelve the collection in the new order once the books came back with their new labels. And so there was, as we found later, some things weren't, of course, reshelved to the right place, but that could happen I've done it. So it can happen with anyone. That's anybody can happen there. But the other issue that was big for us that I didn't think about or really anticipate at the time we started this project in 2017 was that we'd be having to move just a few years later to about a third of the space that we had. So we actually had to downsize the catalog collection by almost 50%. So then have to determine what books we really wanted to keep here at the Mother House and what books could be transitioned to the university's collection. So that was a whole adventure that was a challenge, and a very unanticipated challenge, and kind of frustrating when you think of all the work that just went into, putting all this in order and getting them on the shelves, and then now having to cut it down. But it's really worked out. Like I said, it's all of this just keeps fostering more interest. Even as things have shifted and that, it's like, well, now it's available. It has its own room, at the university. So they're really embracing, the collection and its future. So.
And I should not forget that our story map project was scheduled for the spring of 2020. So, how soon we do forget. We had done all the preparation, and we ended up having to really adjust how we were going to finish that off. And it didn't go in any way like we would have hoped it had, because we had to close campus and they had to close campus. And so, yeah, I would guess I should call that an actual problem. But we did end up finishing the story map, and we're very happy with it. It turned out great, and we feature it prominently on our website. And so I wouldn't hesitate to do that again. And certainly that was nobody's fault.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Veronica talked about this a bit already, but what was it like to work with the students, and were there any challenges with that?
Yes. You know, students are students. I taught a history class, a college level history class one time, and it was a 16-week class, and I learned a lot. I expected that I was going to be going in there and be amongst fellow adults who were all had an equal interest in the topic. And I think that that was a bit ambitious and hopeful. There's still in many ways younger people with a different outlook, and yeah, so there's always a bit of trial and error when it comes to students. How do you stand up in front of a group of people, or how do you channel a group of people and get their attention and get them to follow through with the learning objectives is always a challenge. I really hand it to college professors and all the work that goes into putting content into those classes, and certainly collaborating with these two professors has given me a view into what's involved with that. So it's challenging, and will students take to it? And the one thing I always think is, if you can share your enthusiasm for the collection, the work, the community, if you can let that shine through and not be nervous and not try really even to be too professional or too unemotional, if you can let them see that you care about this, that they will as well.
Mhm. And just as you shared, Jennifer, I really am inspired by how professors can take this primary source content and bring it to life for a younger audience, and really get them engaged, and hopefully will remember this history going forward and their connection to the community here. For me, so prior to this whole collaboration, a part of those orientation classes is that every section would come and get a tour of the mother house. And so I gave some of those tours, and it was like, I always said it was like walking around with a group of zombies, just everyone's just dead faced and you're talking to yourself for an hour. And I'm
Right.
like, is it just me? Like, I'm not a teacher as a background, maybe I gotta figure out how to make it more engaging. So as a part of this collaboration, really seeing how they were able to get students engaged with the same content that we provided in that tour setting in a classroom was really just so encouraging. And yeah, so that's definitely something that I've taken away from it. And I'd say working with the students through the library who had the experience in shelving, I mean, they came on their winter break a lot of times to actually work with us. So that was above and beyond what they really had to do. So we really appreciated their time and efforts to get us to where we are today.
One thing I've learned about that zombie face is that it doesn't necessarily mean they're not listening and enjoying. And sometimes the biggest zombie faces are the ones that come to you afterwards and have more questions. And so don't let that scare you.
Because it really is. I mean, it was so daunting.
Yes.
I had to do, we haven't, since COVID, we haven't had that tour program, since. So we had one professor who actually was a student and went through the tour, and she said, now I'm a professor here and we got to do it. And I was like, well, our mother house is open. We can do it. And sure enough, it was the same. I'm like, oh, geez. But hopefully they did get something out of it. I was like 3 years later, and I'm still not any better at this, but oh gosh.
Well, it sounds like these projects were positive experiences for you both. What were the benefits of the collaboration to the archive, or even to you personally?
Yeah, I think it's such a strong win-win, and maybe even a win-win-win. So for myself, I just really enjoy it. I care about history. I care about this community and the history of this community and preserving their history. And so I love to share that with students and see them also get excited. And then, of course, for the faculty and the colleges, they are getting help with these hard classes that they have to conduct and investment from somebody else. And so we can help them achieve their objectives. And then even again, for our community cares about Aquinas College, and Aquinas College cares about the sisters. So it's, these projects do tend to bloom other projects. So just all kinds of benefits.
Well, I'll try to share my screen to show visually some of the benefits of that cataloging project. Let's see, I'm gonna switch over first. I had something else pulled up, but essentially all of the collection is part of this focus catalog. And let's see. For some reason, it's still, I had it always pulled up, but it keeps defaulting back to the home screen. But this is a Sister Elizabeth Seton McDonald who worked at Woods Hole University and wrote quite a few papers in the field of biology in the 1930s and 40s. And we have her thesis and dissertation on plants in Indiana, which was requested recently by one of the faculty members for a project. And another faculty member who was studying the history of early Catholicism in Cincinnati had asked to utilize a thesis that we had in our collection that wasn't from one of our sisters, but a sister of Mercy. And when I looked it up in the World Library catalog, it turned out we had the only copy in the world, according to
Wow.
them. So I contacted the Mercy Heritage Center right away to say, do you have this at all? And thankfully they do. They're just, they don't have their collection cataloged yet, but we did make a digital copy so that we both had another format of this work since it is so rare. And with that, we were able to share it with the professor, so we wouldn't have to physically let him borrow the copy. So that's an example. And then I briefly shared about a later collaboration, which was through our Ohio Memory, which is through the Ohio Historical Society. They provide a digital repository to heritage institutions in the state. And we both, we initially had one for the archives here with the community, and through our collaboration with the university, they decided to make a page for the university archives and library, and have now added thousands of photographs through student-led projects, all the yearbooks that they have. That was another Sister Elise grant project, and a variety of other sources that they've come across. So it's been very beneficial on the physical side of providing content to folks.
So it sounds like, I mean, you formed your own impressions as you went along with how it was going, but did you at any point get feedback from the university or the students about how they thought it went, either during or when it was done?
For us, just anecdotal, just students telling us they enjoyed it and professors telling us they enjoyed it. I know that the professors have to do an evaluation with all their students, and they haven't shared that with us. But I always ask, is there anything that we didn't cover? Is there anything that you would do differently? And that's basically how we get feedback.
Mm-hmm. And I definitely echo that. Yeah, it's just kind of more ancillary that we've come across. A student might say, thanks, I've learned a lot from this, or, and the example of those orientation classes, we started with kind of the major texts of, the overall history of the community. And then now, since that's really established, we're getting the opportunity to delve deeper into specific sisters' works and specific missions and things. So it's neat to see that and just kind of the collaboration and the interest deepen as time goes on.
So looking back at how it went, what the process was, decisions you made, is there anything you wouldn't have done that way if you could do it again?
One thing I've learned the hard way more than once, unfortunately, is that if you're going to do something that involves content like a story map, you have to be sure that the resources match up with the subject of the project and the product. So I learned, I've done exhibits when I was a college archivist, and I learned that you couldn't just brainstorm, what will be the next subject of your exhibit, what would be a good exhibit to do. Instead, you had to flip it and do it the other way and say, what material do we have that could go in an exhibit, and what story could we tell from there? So when we did our story map, we wanted subsequent classes to add on to it. So our first class, we wanted to start with the very early history. And again, hoping that subsequent classes would have material there to add on later decades. But the very early period had much fewer primary sources related to it. So I've learned that lesson the hard way. Be sure that the resources are there for the project you want to do.
That's hard to anticipate though when you start out, I bet.
That's true. If something morphs, yep.
Yeah, because we're working on a display project now, and that's something we're coming across, especially with images. We're talking the 1850s, 1860s, yeah, even illustrations, it's hard to find ones that are actually relevant for what you're doing. But in terms of challenges for us, I'd say the only one is kind of what I shared. I wish I would have known that move was so imminent, because otherwise we really could have planned more with maybe segmenting the collection at the get-go in terms of what would go to the university and what would stay here, so that it wasn't so chaotic, because we had all the books boxed up, and then trying to figure out, okay, from this book, what do we want to, and what should stay, and what do we have space for? And it was a lot more stressful than I think it would have needed to be if I had known that we were going to be moving relatively shortly. So I would say that's the only thing I wish we would have been able to anticipate.
And overall, looking back, what did you learn from the experience of the collaboration in the project?
I think you learn 100 or 1,000 little things. You learn about your own collection. You learn about how college learning happens. You learn about the professor's needs. I think it would be, again, it would instead of big major lessons, I learned 100 little things.
And I'd say just broadly, definitely the value of the Mount St. Joseph University Library team, not just Scott Lloyd, but Julie Flanders, who's the cataloging librarian, Josh Zeller, who's the interlibrary loan coordinator, who also was a student and worked here at the Mother House in our communications department. So it's just very instilled with the spirit and interested in sharing the history of the sisters. And then beyond that, just how we've been able to work together so well on really major grant funding opportunities where it requires everyone to really participate. If you're going to write, a 15, 20 page grant application, that it was a true collaborative effort. It's not like it was just me, so, and to bring everybody's perspectives in too was very helpful when we got to those, the grant phase aspect. Yeah, and just to share a bit too with Josh is he's just been so excited about the history. There's been interest from our sister who's coordinating mission at the university. They're looking to received national landmark status for their modern day chapel, which was designed in the 1960s by students. So that's a rare kind of quirk to it. And Josh was able to actually go and do a lot of extensive research using not only the library, but both of our archival collections at the university here and with the sisters, and helped to put together the full proposal that was submitted this year to the state. And once that goes along, then hopefully it'll be submitted to the National Historic Registry next year. So yeah, they're an amazing team. We're so blessed to have everybody just so passionate about the sisters and the history.
As I listen, it really seems like I'm hearing a lot about the importance of relationship, of growing together and helping each other and knowing each other and just building upon that.
Yeah, but as I said, we stay in touch weekly. I mean, I'll get messages, not just requests, but FYI type information, hey, did you hear about this? Or, a resource that we might be interested in knowing more about here, and potential grant opportunities or projects that we can collaborate on. Yeah, it's just been a wonderful experience. Definitely a highlight for my time here with the sisters.
I would call it a highlight too. And I've known students who have gone into the archival field. And so then you're feel like you're really promoting the work. And yeah, it's just, it just expands.
So that finishes my questions, but does anyone in the audience, anyone have a question for our panelists about this topic? Yes, Estee.
Hello, I am the new archivist for the Racine Dominicans, and right now our whole collection is cataloged physically in lots of large binders of finding aids. And so my next step is to get everything into archive space. And I'm wondering, in your experience, when would you start reaching out to local institutions? Because I've been going back and forth about starting in 6 months or starting in a year, because I want to be able to give them the breadth of what we have, rather than having them needing to dig through different PDFs about what would work and what would not work for their individual, whether it's classes or student projects. So when is the right time? Because if I'm just worried, if I start too soon, that it'll sort of poison the well. And when we're talking about relationships, I want to make sure that everything starts out on the right foot.
Jennifer, do you want to start with this one?
I would say that's going to be tricky. That is tricky timing. Often when I start a new job, I kind of feel like, oh, I need time to get my footing. And I would say you do want to be quite clear about what you expect from them and how you want the project to go. Of course, it never hurts to have the conversation and to find out what the faculty are thinking and get their input. But I would think you would want to be able to really direct them.
Mm-hmm. And then if you're doing kind of a broader reach out to local heritage institutions, maybe just start with an introductory email, about where you are and the collections, and, if there is the possibility for collaboration coming up, with a special project or a grant, just kind of start there and then see how it goes. Because when you mentioned with finding aids, our Xavier University here in Cincinnati, there's a state project currently where we can upload encoded archival description to a system that's run through the library network, but that's apparently dying next year, which was a real shocker. That came out like a month ago. I'm like, no, that's where I have all of my finding aids. But anyway, so there's talk through Xavier University that their digital content management system can continue to host that content. So yeah, it's worth kind of at least, making those initial connections so that if there are projects like that coming up or major changes like that, that you can hopefully work through things together.
Thank you.
We have a question in the chat about how to engage students with the archives in a classroom setting. For example, would you use readings, oral histories, or having them do the archive research themselves? And what has had the best outcome for you in the past in terms of sources or ways?
I think that the more that you trust the students, the more they're going to get out of the experience, although I know that's difficult at times. And let's see, where would I go next with that? Again, sharing that how much that you care about this will inspire them as well. I need to think about that a little, I guess. Trust them, and have good, strong expectations. And I think it will pay off.
And I'd say just in our experience, trying to keep things as relevant to today's topics as possible. So one of the things that seemed to connect the most, especially again, pre-COVID, when we were doing those tours with all the different classes, was they had incorporated either a whole day or at least a segment of one of their class syllabuses to our sister Paula Gonzalez, who is known as the Solar Nun. She created a solar powered golf cart, also a solar powered house that she lived and actually basically built from the ground up. And then on the college campus, there is Earth Connection, which was also, I think that might be geothermal, but it was built with recycled materials and things. So there was a lot of interest in her story, and some of the questions that we got on the tour were related to her life and ministry beyond what they learned. So it felt like if there's a way to engage more in a topical format, that seemed to fit, or at least for my experience.
So if you have any questions that you want to send into the chat, rather than raising your hand, I'll be reading that. You can do that too. But I see a hand up. Michelle?
Actually, I just wanted to comment on that question a little bit too. I have limited experience with students, but I have done a lot of outreach in the community. I find too, if you start with a really cool story, something very bizarre, interesting, unusual, that tends to grab people into, because I think a lot of times the perception is that sisters are quiet church mice who don't really do anything interesting. So when you throw that notion out the window immediately and hit them with some really impactful story, like what Veronica said with the sister who built the solar panel house, that's cool. And you automatically then start to draw them in because they're like, whoa, that's not my perception at all of what I was thinking this was going to be. And then they sometimes seem more open to hearing the other stories if you can really draw them in with something very interesting at the get-go.
I like that. And the cluing the students in about the whole social justice aspect of the sisters' work is inspiring to them. I am working with faculty on a college campus that was founded by the sisters, but I can't assume that the faculty these days or the students know very much about the sisters at all. And they do find it interesting and exciting.
And there's a new note in the chat that says that the story map that Jennifer has been talking about is available for viewing on the Grand Rapids Dominican website, www.grdominicans.org.
Thank you so much. I didn't even think about showing and telling, but it is fun to see that. So thank you.
Yeah, Sister Mary Navarre shared that with us. So
oh, great.
It is there if you just go to the website. Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you to our panelists and all involved, and to you for your interest and your excellent questions. And thank you for your time, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.